All right, you ready, Brandy? Boy,
Yep.
there's nobody here. One guy? Hey, how come when we all show up, no one else shows up? Perfect.
I don't think you have a...
I'd like to call to order the Thursday, February 23rd, 2017 Plan Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Stein. Stonebarger.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Arnold.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Oh, okay. McGuire is absent. I always do that. Do I say Albertson? Albertson.
He's our council liaison,
I handed you the paper, but I didn't say
Mr.
your name.
Albertson. You'll be straight to the principal's office. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Could I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Hanson, second by Mr. Stonebarger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Second item is the approval of the minutes from February 9th, 2017. A motion?
I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Arnold, second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Third item on the agenda is a resolution amending Chapter 21.23 in regard to the RG Residential Garage District.
So, the residential garage district was approved by the Plan Commission on March 21st of 2013 and then approved by City Council April 15th of 2013. And this is just background. And then it was brought to the attention of staff to research maximum sidewall height with the inquiry to raise the sidewall maximum height to 16 foot with the language of sidewall articulation included in ordinance. So then it was brought as new business and old business, and then as of last meeting, you guys came to the conclusion of raising the maximum sidewall to 16 foot to revise the written consent percentage to be 55% instead of 100% of all property owners owning property immediately adjacent to the proposed zone, to allow a sanitary sewer connection, leave finishes for structure aesthetics up to the building official's discretion, and include sidewall articulation language. So, then, if you look at the resolution, which I'll pull it up here, there you'll see the written consent change to the preferred 55% for property owners immediately adjacent to the proposed zone and property owners within 250 feet of the proposed zone. And then this change here is just changing into a sentence. It was just a clerical thing if we're doing amendments. And then here is where a garage's maximum sidewall heights shall not exceed 16 feet. And then the sidewall articulation comes in at F, where it says a sidewall of a building that exceeds 12 feet in height and 20 feet in length requires sidewall articulation in the form of a structural projection of at least 1 foot in depth and 6 feet in length and must extend from grade to eave. And then I included figures below to explain that further. And connection to sanitary sewer is allowed. And then here is the figure. So as long as you don't, if your sidewall is taller than 12 feet and it's not longer than 20 foot, you don't need sidewall articulation. And then that's what this is this figure is showing. And then this figure is showing that if it was higher than 12 foot, the sidewall height, then if the run is over 20 foot, then they need to include the articulation, like so. And then just for clarity, we included the definition of sidewall articulation as being the physical variation in the appearance of the wall forming the side of a structure.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the adjustment to the ordinance. One thing, Brandy, and I talked to Dennis about, I didn't get a chance to talk to anybody else on it, is when I went back and looked, our minimum lot size in the RG district is 5,000 square feet. our maximum building size is 2,100 square feet, which is 43% of the lot coverage, which is fine. That's what we. But what we haven't covered here is somebody who has a bigger lot. Let's say somebody's got a 25,000 square foot lot. We're going to limit them to a 21 by 80 building on a 25,000 square foot lot that really can serve no other purpose. To me, that's 8.7% of lot coverage on that larger lot. What I looked at, and I talked to Dennis on it, is if we could add into the ordinance that says 2180 is your maximum building size, or 20%, whichever is greater. Which means if you got a 25,000 square foot lot, you can put up a 5,000 square foot building. You're still only using 20% of the lot coverage. The rest of the lot is vacant, bare. You know, and my thought was a larger building. What we did with the 5,000 and the 2180 is we said we don't want too much building on too small lot. Well, now we've got a guy with a big lot that can't put any building on it, and a large building on a larger building on a large lot doesn't give you the appearance of being out of place. Any thoughts on that?
That makes sense.
No, I think you said it, Pat. That makes sense. You know,
Because our thought is
you've
trying
got
to
a
make
large
it look
lot.
like it belongs there. And there are, you know, what we found, we started this garage district and we kind of threw it up against the wall a few years ago and said, we're going to put something out there that we think has a need, but it really hasn't been used very much. You know, and there are a lot of lots out there that fit into this 5,000 square foot area that makes sense, but I think we're going to find there's some larger lots out there too that people would put a little bigger building on. And when you start looking at your building sizes, a 40-foot width building, a 22-foot pontoon takes up 37 feet from the back of the motor to the front of the tongue. I measured it. And you're going to find guys that are going to want 50s and 60s now so they can get them in and move them. You know, they might be wide and more narrow, but I do think we might find some bigger lots that are out there that guys are going to want to put one big building, because their only option would be to split the lot and make it two lots and put two smaller buildings on there, and I don't think that's what we want either. From the busyness looking, I'd rather see one large building on a large lot than a bunch of small buildings on that are taking up more lot coverage than a large building. But my thoughts anyway.
Well, Pat and I talked about that today. If you had a motorhome, for example, or a big fifth wheel camper, and then you've got a boat, a pontoon, and maybe any kind of other toy, you wouldn't get it in that smaller one. That's where you probably want to.
Some of the lots I looked at are out on Antelope Lane. Those are 25,000 square foot lots out there on the west side of the lake. Then on the north side of the lake where Arizona Avenue is, there's smaller 5,000 square foot lots there where the smaller buildings make sense there and the bigger buildings may make sense further around. Or if you get on the outskirts of town where people own those larger lots.
I got a question. You're saying anything larger than 5,000 square foot, you're going to limit it to 20% of the lot coverage.
No, I'm just going to say anything. I'm just going to say our lot size. The way I did it, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, is maximum building size is 2180 or 20%, whichever is greater, which means 20% could be greater. But if we said 20%, well, then a 5,000 square foot lot can only put up a 1,000 foot building.
I understand the 2180 or 20%, but you'd have to go from 5,000 up to 11,000 square feet before you get anything bigger than
Probably.
2180,
Yeah.
which is kind of, if I had an 11,000 square foot lot, I'd divide it in two lots so I could put two buildings on it
Right.
rather than.
I see what you're saying, because
You
there's a
think-
there's a
you
gap
don't think
there.
the 20%'s maybe big enough.
You want to make it 30% or so, I don't know, but it seems like it's a little punitive because you've got a,
You got
between
so-
5,000 and 11,000 square feet,
You
you
handcuff
don't get
'em.
any break.
Mhm.
Pat, I want to just make a comment. I don't have a preference myself, but I just want to put this out there. In 2013, when this RG district came forward, at least one member of the council is how that limit of 2180 got set. And I don't know how the council would receive your new recommendations of course, because we haven't discussed this before this point in time. But I do know that they were concerned about the size of the garages on these lots at that time, and they may not share the board's opinion on making it
You know, I
larger.
think that's why we're talking on bigger lots. I mean, they're 2180 on a small lot versus 2180. I mean, you look and go, say, you guys got there's 25,000 square foot lots out there, and we're limiting them to almost 8% of their lot usage. They can't put a house there because the sewer is 3/4 of a mile away.
True, but a 54 by 40 foot building is not a garage.
True. I'd argue too that when we built this, we weren't talking about garages to put cars in either. You don't put a 40-foot motorhome in a garage. You put them in a building.
True.
And
True.
that's,
I mean,
you know,
and
yeah.
I'm just bringing that out
Yeah.
as a caution because I
Well,
wasn't.
if
I
we do
wasn't
it, I
here,
might
but I
have-
saw that comment
Yeah.
in the paperwork.
I'd have to, we might have to talk to some of the council members and explain where they're at. You don't find 20,000 square foot lots in the heart of town either, where they're probably more worried about this type. What do you think, Ken?
Well, it might have been that same mentality when they were thinking a 10-foot sidewall. You know, I mean, that's their mindset at that point. Now we're talking about trying to let people put some of these toys away. And
Well,
pretty
we want 'em to
expensive
put 'em
toys in a
away
lot of
is the
cases,
problem.
and get them off the streets and out of
Yeah.
the alleys and.
Right. Yep. And I'm not arguing for or against this. I'm just saying that was the kickback the last time it was revisited, and I don't know how the council would receive the new information that you're trying to bring forward. But that's up to them.
Yeah.
Because that was an amendment brought after it was approved to have a max.
And I think we still have a max. It's just we're allowing some of the larger lots to you know, they're getting less coverage but more square footage. That'd be the
Yeah.
trade-off, but you know.
And I think, Pat, like you said, we may need to talk to some of the council members and explain a rationale, so they know that, like we talked today.
It'd be interesting if we could do an aerial view of where some of these lots that would fall into those categories would be, that we could show them also. You know, we used to be able to do that where we had areas of R2 highlighted and potential R2. It'd be interesting to see, you know, we did it with fireworks also, of what lots were available to have fireworks stands. It'd be interesting to see if we could, what platted lots in the city limits would fall into that category where there's enough square footage to qualify as a garage district, and how big those lots are.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised that we haven't had more requests for RG
This is why.
in town.
This
But-
is why.
okay.
They're just, buildings aren't big enough.
And then, you know, I don't have like I said, I don't have a preference. I just wanted to put that out there.
I was
And-
surprised too that I thought this would be a really neat district on the outskirts of all these developments in the less valuable lower land, and I think in some cases we haven't had a big development come in yet, and I think some of these other areas, you know, this particular area in Antelope Lane over here, we've gone back to this one many times. Can you put up there, just out of curiosity, where the sewer and water is?
Here is sewer, and then these red dots are the fire hydrants.
So if you go further down to your lower corner there, these are the lots that people have come to me on. See how far they are from the sewer? I mean, these lots are all owned by someone else, and you could go even further down where Hested's are, way down there. You know, there's some sewer there, so sewer does run through that area where they could hook in, but those center lots, there's no sewer access to any of them. If you go back, see all those lots right there, that they're a long ways from the sewer. So those lots sit there vacant, idle, can't put a house there, because it's my understanding that if you're in one of these lots that are far away, how do you get the sewer to you? Who pays for it?
Well, I think another issue with the sewer that we talked about, and Kenny, is that if you're, 200 feet to a sewer, you need to hook up to sanitary city sewer? Okay. And these garages are set up when we're allowing sewer in them, just if they want to clean some fish or wash their car or something, they can do that, or wash their hands, go to the bathroom, whatever. But in one sense, if we require that, and that might muddy the water a little bit in this RG district, they've got to dig sewer in from across the road and dig up the road and repair the road and everything else. What would the thoughts be? I'm just thinking out loud of letting them have a holding tank.
Can they,
What's your feeling on that?
Brittany, can you move that back to the middle again, to the middle of
Is there
that
a problem
section?
with holding tanks?
Right
Well-
there? Can they do they have to tap into the road, or do they have to go further north? Like that one right in the dead center where the road goes back there. Can they tap into the sewer at the closest point, or they got to go way back to where the trunk ended?
I can't see the drawing, so I can't answer your question. I can't see the screen, but typically, okay, standard development, you extend the utilities that you think the property needs in front of the property so they have access. So if there isn't any sewer, you would have to evaluate whether, A, it's available to extend that way and maintain its standard depths that we like to design in, and B, then somebody's going to have to weigh whether it's cost effective to do this. Now, one thing we haven't discussed here is by adding sewer and water to these provisions, they will be getting a sewer charge and pay at least the base sewer charge and meter charges and all that stuff. You're tying that to this development as well. So that said, you'd still have to extend utilities by our standard ordinances and procedures to allow them to have the utilities. Now, if it happens to be there already, then that investment's already been made. But if it doesn't exist, somebody would have to develop and install said utilities. Then,
If they wanted it, it's still just may within our ordinance. They don't have to have them in here.
In
Right.
all of these lots, they'd have to tag into sewer on Antelope Lane. I don't think they'd let them tag into North Lake Drive sewer.
correct.
And some of them are 1,000 feet from the sewer.
Yeah, and that's not to say that that can't be extended to closer to them, but at somebody's cost. Then, with regard to the question that Mr. Arnold asked about holding tanks, the caveat to holding tanks in this community is we have a very extensive portion of the city that's in the aquifer protection zone, and that puts arduous criteria on those holding tanks, and so that's not always the simple answer either. So they'd have to abide by those provisions on the holding tank. So I won't categorically say that I haven't had holding tanks, but there's a higher standard to a holding tank than just a bucket in the ground or something like that.
All right, any other questions in the open? Anyone to speak in the open?
I'd like to address the sidewall articulation and then. I'm sorry, sidewall articulation, and then even with we don't really address the eave issue. I know we have 1 foot. To me, 1 foot really isn't enough, and if your rafters are. Yeah, I'm sorry. You want me to start over then? All right. We talk about the 1 foot in depth. Realistically, your rafter is going to be a minimum of 2 foot. That I don't think 1 is enough. And then to me, the eaves, I guess, also should be in proportion with the height of the building. A 1 foot eave on a 16-foot sidewall is going to look less than desirable.
Go back to our contract designer. What's the right answer? What do you think?
Well,
He's talking about that 1 foot overhang.
Correct.
that's what I
versus
said
2
last
foot.
time. I thought if we came up last meeting, I thought if we're gonna have a 16-foot sidewall, you should have more than a one foot overhang.
Correct.
Otherwise, you just get a big tall box.
Right.
That's what we're
And,
trying to
what
get
you're
away
trying to do is you put that eve in there so it does look,
from. Yeah.
I'm not gonna say
We put the
residential,
sidewall
but similar.
articulation in, we want a bigger overhang. We want these garages to look nice because they're probably gonna be across the road from somebody's house.
Mm-hmm.
And we want them to look nice when they're done.
So you guys would like to at least extend the depth, what number would you say? 2? Or?
On the overhang,
Well,
for
both.
Yeah,
on the articulation?
yeah. As far as like
Well,
the 1
definitely,
foot depth.
a 2 foot's gonna look a lot nicer than a 1 foot. There's no
Okay.
question about that.
I think a 2 foot eve too.
The only-
Don't you think?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'd like to see a 2 foot more. The only thing you have to consider, you've got your side, clearance on the side, and if you have to bump a little bit of your garage out 2 foot, and now that's encroaching into your side setback. I don't know if that'll be an issue or not, but I'd like to see it be a 2 foot.
You can't, no, that's still your
You
side
can't-
setback.
you
They
can't
can't come
encroach.
into the setback.
I'm saying you can't encroach in it, but
No.
that 2 foot bump out will tell you that you're X number of feet from your property line,
Right.
so.
And that's and where I came up with the 1 foot by 6 foot is I modeled it from St. Paul's. And they said that was an issue that they ran into, is not having, if it could encroach in their side yard setbacks. And that's where I think it would that wouldn't even be an issue because it would just be included in your setback. Like that you would still have
Yeah.
the same setback, and if you had to bump
You
out
have the same
2 foot.
setbacks, and
Yeah, the setbacks from the nearest wall.
if your RG lot is that small, that by putting a 2 foot articulation in that sidewall, if you
Your
have to
building's-
narrow your whole
yeah.
garage up, I guess you have to narrow your whole garage up. That's the bottom line. I'd rather see it look nice than, that's the reason we're going through this whole exercise of changing this whole ordinance, is to allow people to use these garages, make them practical, but make them look nice when we're finished.
Right.
So 2 foot,
2 foot.
fine with that.
That's 2 foot for the sidewall bump out, and then another 2 foot for eve
For the
overhang.
eve, yeah.
Correct.
Setbacks, and the setbacks measured off the sidewall, correct, Ken? Not off the eve.
It's at the footprint where it touches the ground.
They
We don't measure the
address
eve.
the eve directly in here, but we're adding that as a caveat.
Correct.
Is 20 feet the right number there? Maybe you can provide your opinion. I thought that might be a little bit too short. I guess I was thinking more along, 30, 32 feet.
But do you really want a 20-foot by 16-foot tall building? A short building is going to look worse than a longer building.
Yeah.
The longer it gets, the better it's going to look with a 16-foot sidewall, not the shorter.
30 foot wide, 16 foot tall.
Yeah, especially at a 16-foot sidewall. I just don't want to be too aggressive. That's all I'm considered with.
It's all just food for thought, so.
Come on up.
Hi, Mike Lawrence. I guess I see what you're doing, and I just want you to look at like the roof line and the rafter line when you think about bumping that out, as well as aesthetically. If you side that the same color as the rest of the building, that bump out isn't added any more attraction in my book. You just have a bump out with the exact same color as the rest of your shed. It makes it not so big and boxy, but it's still plain Jane with. If I build a 50-foot by 20-foot shed and the whole thing's tan and I bump it out, you're not gaining anything by having that bump out there. In my opinion, it just looks like an ulcer sticking out of the building. You got to look at it that way. As at one point, that could look worse.
What would you recommend, Mike? When you,
Mike wants a seat on the
from, Dennis,
You got no solutions.
Well, last meeting, Brandy brought pictures and showed us of garages that were built like the one on the left and ones that were done with some bump outs on the right. your picture that you're showing, we're not saying every single garage that has a 2-foot jog in the wall has to look like that.
No.
That's not what we're saying. We're just saying you have to break that wall up.
Yep.
Right,
Might
this
break
is
it
this
up
is a
2 or 3
minimum
times.
requirement.
And the nicest, most attractive garages you saw last week, and everybody admitted, was the ones that had that wall was broken up. There was no question, as the pictures we looked at. So, I think it needs to be articulated, but it doesn't all have to look like that one.
Yeah, I agree with you, but as a builder and as building by value, my first option is going to be at the 20-foot mark. I'm going to bring it out 2 foot. I'm never going to put a window in it. I'm not going to put a door. I'm not going to put any. I'm going to have a 2 foot by whatever 6 foot ulcer sticking
Yep.
out of this the exact same color.
But I still have final approval.
Yeah, that's what I was
that.
going to say. We put the
Yep.
verbiage in there that the intent of the ordinance to what we wanted to do, we wanted to allow people to make their buildings more functional for the properties that we're asking them to store inside, basing it on the size of the lots, but we want that building official. You still have to use the customary materials used on the homes, you know, and you're right, Mike. Somebody's going to go out there and build the minimum standards.
Yeah.
Our hope is people go out there and say, I own the $500,000 house across the street. I'm not going to put a junk shed up across the road. You'd hope they do, but eventually somebody's going to put a minimum standard building across from someone else's property.
Well,
And that's where we want to put a little bit of a stopgap in there with the
And that's
building
our hope.
inspector.
If they can afford motorhomes and they can afford boats and fish shacks and all the stuff that we have, they ought to be able to spend a little bit more to build a nice-looking garage. That's all we're saying.
But I don't want to
Trying
get
to
too
give them the
ridiculous on
opportunity
the,
to
you
do
know, like make it a 20-page checklist just to build a garage. I mean, I
And
want to keep
we-
it somewhat simple and
And we don't want them coming back for variances. We want to be able to say, here's the basic idea of what we'd like you to do, but we want the building inspector to make sure it conforms to the area.
because we currently now will even ask people to add a window or something just to break it up, make it look a little better, or an eyebrow or something. So, and we've never been opposed when we've made the request.
And we talked about that, you know, all the different methods that you can utilize on those high sidewalls. I mean, you could do, you know, brick part of the way up and then siding. There's any number of features that you can add from an aesthetics portion. Do you dial it in and spell it all out here, or kind of leave it up to Ken to make that call? I guess that's the question. But it should be aesthetically pleasing is the point of it. So.
You know, and I look at this way. I don't think that we as a board can't dictate how somebody builds their buildings and what they want them to look like. It's their money and they're spending their money. But if we're going to do something, it's our responsibility, because what we allow and what we don't allow, the citizens of Watertown have to look at for the next 100 years. And that's how I look at all these buildings that are, you know, I drive around town and there's some that are more attractive than others, and I appreciate the people that go the extra mile to spend a couple extra bucks so that everybody in town sees it and enjoys it. And it'll be like that for a long, long time, year after year after year. So.
So
Well,
then,
if you flip back to the garage that you saw earlier, the one before you showed, that's an example of that. Flip back one more. Now that garage could have been built a whole lot cheaper, but it looks very nice.
mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. You don't have to maybe go quite that elaborate, but
Yeah, just to articulate it a little bit.
so anyway.
So then, are you guys thinking that, are you comfortable with the 20 foot in length before you have to articulate the sidewall?
I am. 20 foot's not that terrible. You know, most of these are going to be 40s. You know, 40, maybe a 60 you'd see on a big lot somewhere. Anyone else speak in the public hearing?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I just didn't know if it was too aggressive, so I just wanted to.
With that, I'll.
Wait one second.
Oh.
What if you have a 25-foot garage? 26-foot. You gotta break that up, and you could just go 20 feet and then have a bump out at the end.
If I accept it,
Okay.
With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. I think in that motion, we need to add that 2 foot bump out in the eave, and then make sure
And
we,
24 inch over.
Yep, and then it's noted to the building inspector's approval.
Is the eve supposed to be 2 foot on any, whether it's 12 foot or 16 foot or anything? We want at least a 2 foot eve? Is that a minimum then? Or are we setting a foot at 12 and 2 foot above, or what? I'm just trying to clarify for us to write it.
I'd go 2 foot anything over 12, because 12 is that height that we're allowing them to get above. And we want it to look nice,
So a 2 foot eve overhang.
over 12 feet.
Okay.
Do I have a motion? I have a motion by Mr. Arnold, second by Mr. Stonebarger. Any questions on the motion? We basically took everything you added. We added 2 foot eve and a 2 foot articulation. And
Were you
then, and final approval is from the building inspector.
And your 20%?
And the 20%.
So then that
2180,
language-
not to exceed 20% of the lot size.
The language will be maximum size shall not exceed 2,180 square feet or 20% of lot area in square feet, whichever is greater. Along those lines.
Commissioner Stonebarger did mention the higher amount, where there would be a gulf between
Let's
the
go
two.
back through that. Yeah, let's stop on that 20 in the motion.
Come back with variance on
Because of the gap between 5 and 10,000. Do you have a number in there rather than 20 that brings into that?
You know, if you had 30%, that give you a little bit more. You know, 30% of a lot is not a lot. There's still 70% grass.
Right, that was my point is these buildings on large lots, if you limit to a smaller building, it's a very small building on a large lot and looks out of place in an area, because there won't be a house there. You know, there's no room for a home, there's no allowing for a home there.
And we do have the additional caveat about 50% of impervious surface, including the structure too, so.
So it still will have that rural type of look. So let's go to 30%. You guys okay with that? Okay, Mark?
Sure.
Okay.
You're easy today.
So I have a motion by Mr. Arnold. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Stein. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll ask for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the rezone of Gilbert's Addition, the R4 manufactured home. They'd like to change it to an R3 residential, multifamily residential district.
Let me get there. Okay. So the Watertown School District, Lake Area Technical Institute, South Dakota Health and Educational Facilities, and the South Dakota Board of Education submitted an application and petition requesting approval for rezoning the current described property from R4 manufactured homes residential district to R3 multifamily residential district. They previously received a conditional use from the Board of Adjustment on February 9th because schools are conditional uses in residential districts, but they're not allowed in R4, but they are allowed in R3. Adjacent zoning designations, there you got C2 to the south, R3 to the north and east, and R2A to the west. The adjacent public right-of-ways will be included in the rezone. It meets all the requirements for R3 lot minimum sizes. Municipal utilities will provide service to the annexed property. Oh, that is not supposed to be in. This is not getting annexed. Some of the property is slightly in the floodplain to the west, and it does not need park dedication.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing for anyone to speak on behalf or against it. This is the parking lot over by the high school, correct? We talked about last time?
Yeah, it's
Over by the VOTEC.
Yeah.
It used to be a mobile home park. Now it's being used as parking. Did they say they wanted to put a building in there?
Yeah, we granted the conditional use at our last building.
for the building,
Board of
I thought
Adjustment
so.
meeting, so.
And now we just need to rezone it to R3 from R4. There are no mobile homes left over in that area.
No, and they're looking at the robotics building.
Okay. All right. Is anyone here to speak in the public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion in a second for discussion.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Stein. Any discussion on this? We went over it last time where they were
Just
expanding over there.
to be a devil advocate, is there any motion for a school campus zone? We every time we come with a hospital expansion or a school expansion, we always say, well, we should have a school zone or hospital zone. Has there been any movement in that area?
Yeah, we'd all love it.
Do you see that in other communities where they've got some sort of institutional zone for hospitals and schools?
I do think that that's more common, particularly in communities that harbor larger state or private universities, probably more so than the small. In other words, it hasn't been commonly used for elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, but it's certainly at the next level of education, it's a lot more common. And also it's becoming more common in districts or areas that house hospital facilities, because hospital facilities used to be pretty small and on a local scale, and now they're becoming regional centers and occupying a larger footprint in the community. So I think that, at least from my perspective and the staff, and we've been visiting with First District a little bit about this as well, that we would like to figure out how we would incorporate a campus district zone into our system. And so I would say that we're talking about it behind the scenes. We don't have a lot of momentum right at this moment because we've had a lot of other ordinance and policy changes that we've been reviewing. But I would like to think that we're going to step to that subject next.
Thank you. And I'll remember to use that when I'm behind. I don't have a lot of momentum. I like that. Politically correct. Thank you. That answer your question, John? Yep. What's the advantage of that institutional district? I mean, here we have existing zoning. I mean, I can see it in a newly platted piece of property. In an existing zone, we would just rezone what we have to institutional. Is it building height, setbacks, are those the things that they're out of the ordinary with?
Well, yes, but what giving its own zoning district would do is it would maybe reduce the amount of public hearings. Like we have these public hearings where we include the whole neighborhood, or everything that kind of touches or within impact or what we perceive an impact is. It kind of diffuses some of that because it gives them some liberty to do what they need to do. I'll give you I guess the classic example is we just rezoned this, or in the process of rezoning this to an R3. Well, R3 is residential construction, and a school flat out isn't residential construction. So if you created a campus, then they would have different liberalized building standards, even though they're abutting a residential thing. So there's ways to enhance their ability to build buildings and change fascia without dragging all the residents in the neighborhood into the discussion.
Makes sense.
Is it fair, Shane, to draw some comparisons between that concept and like a planned unit development?
Yeah.
The same
correct.
rationales kind of apply.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? I have a motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Stein. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The fifth item on the agenda is the preliminary plan for the Morris addition.
Get this squared up here. Okay. So the Morris family is the owner of the property, and petitioners submitted preliminary plans on January 11th requesting approval of Morris Addition. The adjacent zoning designation is C3, and the proposed is also C3 Highway Commercial District. All the lots meet the minimum requirements for the C3 district. The plan will create 8 lots, all in conformance with zoning requirements. It's a proposed 66-foot right-of-way, which is city standard. And then detention pond is required to hold a 2-year capacity volume for the Willow Creek watershed. So then up on the screen there is the proposed preliminary plan. So 26th Street will meet up with the East Park addition and run down to Willow Creek Drive, and then they will connect with this development to the west on 7th Avenue South. There.
Also known as Willow Creek Village.
There you go. I couldn't think of it.
I have a question. Last meeting, you guys approved the East Park plat or addition or whatever. And in that meeting, you said all the lots had access. And when we overlay this on top of that, Lot 7 on the East Park addition does not have a road going to it other than making a curb cut out on the Willow Creek Drive. I would be against making another curb cut on Willow Creek Drive, but I think there should be some consideration for that Lot 7.
So
It's, yeah.
this is East Park, Lot 7. That's the one you're talking about, right, John? The one that I'm kind of outlining?
Yes, but it was, I think it was a little smaller on your plot last week, or last meeting, but
Let's see here. Where did I have that up? Oh, right here. Right here. So this was the one, or no, Lot 7 here
Right.
that you thought.
yeah,
wouldn't
that
have
has
access.
no access.
There were no
to-
roads included in this. You know, we've asked these 3 developers to get together and make this look like we wanted it to, and what I'm seeing here is completely not what we asked them to do.
No, I would
2 years
disagree
ago.
with you 100%.
Put it
because-
back up there. Let's look
because,
at it.
We've actually, what you have to realize is there's more moving parts to this. Bring that other page up that has all the.
Where's the stoplight at?
Well, hang on a minute.
You
Bring
want
up
the
the other
GIS?
one that has, you know, where you were, but then bring in Morris's and then bring in Endress. You had that one.
Oh. right here.
Okay, so I don't know what you're looking for because what they've got is 2 big lots there to the right on the east side. Those are actually going to be sold to the developer on the right. He then is going to be putting in internal roads inside this thing. Some of these lots you have to realize are 4 acres.
They'll access off the
They're gonna come
east-west road there that comes off of Willow
Yeah,
Creek.
they're gonna have the Willow Creek, then they got 26 where they're gonna be able to put access roads inside, internal roads inside. They just aren't showing these roads yet in case there's bigger boxes that are coming in and want to buy a 4-acre site.
Here's the bigger question I have. When we worked on this over the last 5 years, what we've always been told is what we don't want is we don't want a straight shot from Willow Creek to 212 without a street light. It's my understanding the street light's way over to the west, correct?
Well, here's the deal on that because the DOT makes that decision on where the street light goes.
And it's already been made?
Their initial plans are to have it on 23rd Street. Whenever it warrants it, whether it warrants 23rd or 26th, that's when they're looking at streetlights.
When do you know, that was the question we had last time is like, the street light's going to be on 23rd. The big question was, why is it over there? Who put it over there? Because the internal makings of this hadn't been developed at that time. So the street light really there isn't a street light there.
There's not.
And there's
There's
still
not been a determination of a street light until the DOT comes in and literally tells us which corner warrants a street light. Now, I do have to say that when you said we wanted to get all 3 landowners together, we've done that. We've had conversations with the Coho people, with Morris's, and with Endress, all in the same conference call, or all sitting down at a table. This is the plan that they're working together that is really a workable plan. You know, what we've been focused on right now is anything south of 8th Avenue, which has been the biggest part of on the East Park side. That's just going through the plating process right now with their development agreement, which you guys, I think, have looked at. So you've got that really taken care of. You got to the north side of that taken care of. Now the two landowners in between the Coho and the Morrises have struck a deal to buy those two lots that you're bringing in on the Morris side. Those two, those will now be included with the ownership on the east, which in fact
Of lot 7, the big lot?
yes, that whole thing there, that's all going to be owned by the one ownership. He has what his plans are, which he's not showing you. Doesn't want to be held to that, but he wants to, you to understand that there are internal roads going to go there. All the water on that side, they've actually declared, that whole side, he's worked it in there, and to the north, across the road, that's where the water's going to go for all those lots. So they've got grand plans on this, and those are not the only roads that you will see in this project.
And that was John's concern, is we didn't want to have people
Yeah.
pulling out onto Willow Creek.
Yeah, I just didn't, you got two curb cuts there already, and because what appeared that lot was islanded, I didn't want to have a third curb cut onto Willow Creek Drive. But if they're going to have internal roads, that's fine, but wasn't apparent
Yeah,
to me.
that's their intentions, to have internal roads, because there's actually businesses that are looking at those right now, rather large ones that are looking, they're going to need to have that access, and they're going to need to have that internal road at some point if they get the property sold. There's just so many moving parts on this thing right now. It's kind of scary.
We just don't want to make another 19th Street,
No, there's not.
or
Another
an
thing-
11th Street further
Yeah.
down on Highway 212. What is the plans on 26th there? As I look
26th?
at it, it looks like the road's
kinda
dropping
weird.
and it goes
If
to a
you-
half street?
No, we don't want a half street. Right now, I have an MOU that we're drawing up for the Endresses and the Coho. There's 30 feet to the north side of that piece of property. If you look where that dotted line goes on 26, right there, see that? That actually is kind of the question. One landowner says he owns 30 feet. The other landowner says, no, I own 30 feet. So what I'm looking for is an MOU from both of them that says, no, Mayor, it's okay. We're going to build this road, and whoever comes out in the civil courts or wherever it goes, then dedicates that to the city of Watertown. Another thing I just want you to understand is that we've had numerous discussions with the municipal utilities on this part, and our plan is to not have your normal street lights and things like that. This is going to be an upscale street light. It's going to have the LED upscale lights. It isn't just your normal flip over. We're going to have some dollars that we're going to put into as a city in addition to the lights that the utilities puts in for us. So I'm really excited to see this come in front of you guys. This is a process that has taken 4 years just to get the Morrises to move forward, and I think it's a plan that can be worked. And as I said, there will be internal roads. Even on Morrises to the west over there, they have plans to bring different type of roads down into those two lots. I think it's lot 1 and lot 2 right there. They're working with them. So there's different ideas that are floating around, but we wanted to get this plan together to show you that something's going on, and they want to get those lots sold.
Looks nice. I mean, that's our biggest concern was it is a nice area. It is a high dollar area. We want to do it right when
This
we
is
do
going
it.
to look. This is going to really look nice when we're done with this thing. It's going to blow your socks off, and I think it'll be good for you guys to see that when it's done.
From this stand, Brittany, when we approve the preliminary plan, does any of this ever come back before us? Or Brandy, does this ever come back before us again, as far as the road widths, road sizes, curbs, gutters? It's all handled.
We'll bring the plat.
So once it's
Yeah.
platted, once the plats are down into smaller lots, the roads will be put in. We get another look at the road sizes.
And are they gonna maybe leave those as private?
That'd be the question, Shane. If you get this large area, Would the developer typically build the road and then turn it over to the city?
The roads that the mayor's discussing would remain private roads. They wouldn't become public roads. If they were ever to become public roads, then they would have to revisit how our standards are and outlets. And part of the issue is, let's say they built a private road in here, it would need to have an outlet then somewhere else to have an out. You can't have a road that dead ends, especially in a commercial area, because trucks can't turn around and get back headed the opposite direction unless they have a place to do that. And it's not economical to build a big circle at the end of a commercial road typically. But what we have discussed with the developers is that they could do a private road that came in here and maybe exited here, and that occupies two of the entrances that we typically do discuss at these preliminary plans. That's why we have we've established, similar to the East Park addition, as to what space we desire to have between all those openings. And we want to be able to control access to a certain extent, but you can't stranglehold the whole development area either. It's a tough game to try to incorporate everything that's possible.
Thank you. Is anyone else here to speak in the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. I have a motion by Mr. Dolly. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Arnold. Any other discussion? Any questions for Shane?
So with the private road issue that could become public roads, does that get us back into the situation we're at now with the mall that, hey, this thing wasn't built to our standard, and now we've inherited a train wreck again?
No, we wouldn't accept the private roads. These are roads, I hate to use examples in other communities per se, but if you can envision along Louise Avenue in Sioux Falls to the east, every one of those parking lots is tied together. And there's only like 3 or 4 accesses that actually come out onto the public street. We want them to utilize one or two of those accesses that we give them. And then if they want to build internal roads between their parking lots that you could drive along the developed area on private property, we're not going to discourage that. Is that a little clearer example? I mean, so we're still going to restrict how many public access points there are. It's just that we're also going to allow them to interchange their parking lots.
Does this, the roads that are plotted there, are they going to have sidewalks on both sides, or is that addressed, or?
I think they're shown.
Yep.
Yeah.
The red lines represent the sidewalk there.
Right there.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Everybody vote?
Well, yeah.
Motion passes. Any old business?
No.
Randy, new business?
Nope.
Need a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Stein.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hanson. All in favor, say aye. We're adjourned.